My name is Jennifer. I'm a 25-year-old working professional. Currently, I live with my grandmother and commute to work from her house. The reason I live with my grandmother is because my mother passed away from an illness. My mother got sick when I was 3 years old, and it seemed like there was no hope for her recovery. At that time, my father was apparently having an affair, despite my mother's illness. When my mother passed away when I was 5, my father must have found me a burden. He left me with his mother, my grandmother, and disappeared somewhere. Having no siblings and losing both parents, I ended up being raised by my grandparents. Feeling lonely, I would ask every day, "When will Dad come to pick me up?" But my grandparents would just give a bitter smile each time. Gradually, I understood that I had been abandoned by my father. Still, my grandparents, who were in their 50s at the time, raised me with all their might. My grandmother, who had been a housewife, started working part-time so I wouldn't starve. And she bought me beautiful clothes and toys. My grandparents must have been worried about their own retirement. But when I was about to take my high school entrance exam, my grandmother said this to me: "You don't have to be fixated on going to a public high school. Go wherever you want." "But if I do that, I'll be a burden on you and Grandpa." "It's okay. We still have some savings." "No, I'll try my best to get into a public high school. I'll definitely pass, so please support me." "All right, then you have to give it your all." And I successfully got into one of the top public high schools. My grandparents were happy for me, and my grandfather even made a reservation at a restaurant. I felt so fortunate to be celebrated by such kind grandparents. I enjoyed my high school life, but one day I came home to a somber atmosphere. I asked my grandmother what had happened, and it turned out that my grandfather had been diagnosed with an illness. His condition worsened rapidly, and he began going in and out of the hospital frequently. At that time, my grandfather had retired, so my grandmother had to support the family by working multiple part-time jobs. His hospital bills were covered by life insurance, but then my grandmother became unable to work due to exhaustion. That's when she decided to seek help from the government and went to the city office. Yes, she applied for public assistance. The process seemed very complicated, but somehow the application was approved. However, I spent my days wondering what would happen in the future. The high school I attended was a college prep school, so everyone went on to college. I was surprised to hear at the city office that welfare households could not go to college unless they separated their households. However, separating households also reduces the welfare benefits, which is tough. I wanted to go to college, but it was also difficult to go that far, so I decided to work as soon as possible to repay my grandparents. My grandmother tearfully said to me, "I'm so sorry this happened. It's all because of your father. It's because I didn't raise him properly." "It's not like that. Grandpa and Grandma took good care of me. I'll work hard, so don't worry." "I feel so pathetic. You wanted to go to college, and now I'm sorry." Then I got a job at 18. By that time, I was able to make a living without welfare. However, my grandfather's condition was already deteriorating, and he was told he only had a half a year left. In the end, he left me with these words: "Jennifer, I'm sorry for all the trouble." "Grandpa, it's not like that." "Please take care of your grandma. I love you." "Grandpa!" After cremating my grandfather, I worked even harder. I worked a lot of overtime so my grandmother wouldn't have to work part-time anymore. Time flew by, and I turned 25. I was so busy every day that I didn't have time to have a boyfriend. Besides, I couldn't be proactive in love because I thought I might have a handicap from being abandoned by my father. Then one day, I got a call from someone. It was about my father, whom I hadn't been in touch with for a long time, had passed away. He died in a traffic accident. He was my biological father, but I didn't feel a shred of sadness. My grandmother didn't show any signs of sadness either, even though her own son had died. Well, maybe she was actually sad, but she might have hated her son for having an affair and leaving his child behind. It seems my father had told his remarried wife the address of our house. So his remarried wife came to visit our house and said this. Well, John has passed away, as we've already informed you, but now there's an issue with the inheritance. Huh? Would you mind relinquishing your inheritance rights? We don't have any children, so it turns out you also have rights, which is a problem for us. Well, that's fine. I never really thought of him as my father anyway. I don't need anything now. Great, so you'll relinquish. Wait, I'm not giving up my rights. What? I'm asserting my rightful claim. While it's true that I have mixed feelings about my son's death in a car accident, I can't say I'm not sad. But I'm much angrier that he abandoned young Jennifer to go to you. So of course, I'll assert my rights. Is that all you wanted to say? Yes. Then please leave. My grandmother smiled at me and said, that was the right thing to do. And the woman left. Apparently, my father and his second wife had no children and lived a lavish lifestyle together. It seems my playboy father was quite the entrepreneur. He made a fortune in the real estate business. After that, my grandmother called a relative. He happened to be a lawyer. She seemed to be asking if he could mediate the inheritance issue, as she didn't want any conflict. Soon after, that relative uncle came to our house. He agreed with my grandmother. Inheritance disputes can get messy, but in this case, I think you're right, Grandma. Why? I don't want any of the money left by the father who abandoned me. It's tainted. But Jennifer, your grandma did her best to raise you. She put you first, above her own retirement plans. I know that. And don't you think she resents the woman who seduced her son? Don't you agree? I understand how you feel, Jennifer, but let's try to be more mature about this. Okay. I have been stubbornly refusing my father's inheritance, but I started to reconsider. Money they could have saved for their retirement. Raising me must have cost my grandparents a lot of money. They must have spent a lot of money to raise me, although I am sure they were saving for their retirement. They even sent me to tutoring classes in middle school and celebrated special occasions with me. Thinking about it that way, I decided to understand my grandmother's feelings. So I changed my mind and decided to claim my inheritance rights after all. When we informed the second wife, she was furious. In the end, it all comes down to money, even after someone's death. After carefully reconsidering, I've decided to claim my rights. What? I should have never told you people. It's too late now. We have a lawyer in our family, after all. You? How dare you pull such a sneaky trick? I don't want to hear about being sneaky. It's my legitimate right. You were abandoned by your parents, and now you act all high and mighty? Oh, it seems you're not aware that you were also played. What? Turns out, my father had other women as well. He didn't have children with them, though. Wait, what are you talking about? When my father passed away, a woman came demanding his inheritance like a fool. When we talked, surprise, surprise, she was his mistress. Can you believe it? She's a fool for claiming the inheritance while being his mistress. And she wasn't the only one. There were 3 of them. I was shocked, and my jaw dropped. No way. Well, at least they didn't have children. I'm going to claim a significant portion of the inheritance. That's my inheritance. No, don't be selfish. It's mine too, LOL. The remarried wife was sobbing. Of course she would be. The man she thought loved her faithfully had other women. I realized how much of a fool my father was. It's a good thing he didn't have children with them. In the end, I inherited my father's estate. At first, I didn't want anything from such a father, but I had to understand my grandmother's situation better. I gave the money to my grandmother saying, please use it for the future. I'm sorry for what I said before, but I realized something. It must have been hard raising me, right? I want you to use this money for your future. Jennifer, but I can't use all of it. It's okay. But what about when you get married someday? Save some of it for that. Grandma, don't worry about me. But then my feelings are, all I want is to see you happily married someday. Of course, it's fine if you don't get married too. Just live your life the way you want. You don't have to stay here forever. But what about you, Grandma? A year later, I met a wonderful man at a social gathering. We dated and we got married. When he proposed, I was thrilled. He understood my family situation and suggested we live together with my grandmother. I felt terrible, but he said, "Let's be good to your grandma." At the wedding, my grandmother cried her eyes out. I felt like I could finally repay her kindness that day. I'd be happy if I could become even more dependable and put my grandmother at ease in the future.
A massive home renovation for elder care? $30,000? What are you talking about? Huh? That's my wife's parents' house, right? A phone call from a man claiming to be my estranged sister-in-law's husband. Considering how the conversation isn't making any sense, it seems like my sister-in-law is up to something. My name is Martha, a 56-year-old stay-at-home wife. I have a son and a daughter, both of whom are adults and have moved out of the house. Now I live with my husband and in-laws, just the four of us. My relationship with my in-laws is good, which I appreciate because I lost my own parents early in life. My husband and I have been enjoying our lives after being freed from child-rearing responsibilities. When we got married, it was understood that we would eventually live with my husband's parents. But my mother-in-law, who had suffered in her relationship with her own mother-in-law, had our house rebuilt into a two-family home for our sake. Even though we live together, we each have our own private space. Maybe that's why our relationship has been so good. During the day, my husband is still working, so I often spend time with my in-laws. That day, as my father-in-law was busy with farm work, I was preparing lunch in the kitchen, planning for us to eat together outside. Then a call came from one of my father-in-law's farming friends, telling us that he had fallen and broken a bone. He had already been taken to the family doctor in a pickup truck. My mother-in-law and I left the food and rushed to the hospital. When we arrived, emergency surgery was underway. My father-in-law seemed healthy, but he was in his 80s and recovering from a fracture would be tough. We were told to be prepared for the worst, like needing a wheelchair. That's what they were talking about. As long as he's alive, that's enough. I will be his legs. We waited anxiously for the surgery to end with prayers in our hearts. By the time my husband finished work and arrived, the surgery was over, and the three of us were relieved to see my father-in-law sleeping in his hospital room without any serious complications. We decided to support my father-in-law together from now on, but our prayers were in vain, and my father-in-law passed away suddenly 1 month later. His age had weakened his physical strength and immunity, and he had contracted an infection after the surgery. Many of his friends, relatives, and acquaintances were also elderly, so informing them about the wake and the funeral would only be upsetting to them. The three of us discussed it and decided on a family funeral. However, even a family funeral didn't resolve all the issues. "What about my sister-in-law?" I asked. My mother-in-law and husband both made visibly unapproving faces, probably recalling my sister-in-law's marriage turmoil. My in-laws had strongly opposed her marriage. My husband wasn't as opposed as them, but he couldn't purely be happy about it either. As a result, their relationship became strained and distant. Still, she was their biological daughter. Wouldn't it be okay for her to be present at the final farewell? They agreed that if we could get in touch with her, it would be fine. But we couldn't reach her at the contact information we had, and the funeral proceeded without her. It's just how things are with her. It's fate. Don't worry about it, Martha. On our way back from the crematorium to the house with my father-in-law's ashes, my mother-in-law gently patted my shoulder and reassured me. My father-in-law's sudden passing took us all by surprise. Without any mental preparation, we hurriedly went through the funeral and cremation. We clasped our hands over my father-in-law's ashes, lit incense, and spent the following days in a state of listlessness. It's more bearable when my husband is around. We can talk to each other. But when my husband goes to work, I can't stand being alone in the quiet room. So I head to my mother-in-law's room. I know she is feeling even more pain and sadness than I am. After all, she suddenly lost the husband she had been with for so many years. Even if it is just a facade, I try to be cheerful around her. However, my mother-in-law was much more accepting of reality than I thought. I was planning to stay like this until the 49th day, but... Yes, we can sort through his belongings later. But you know, I'm already over 80. You look so young for your 80, mother-in-law. Not having been sick often, she would say that the only time she was hospitalized was for childbirth. In other words, she was directly telling us that she's healthy enough for us not to worry about her. You're so kind, Martha. But while I can still move around, I'd like to sort through my things, including his. I understand the feeling of not wanting someone else to go through the important memories, like my father-in-law's belongings. Understood. Just let me know if you need any help. With that, she immediately asked me to help her take down items that were too high for her to reach. As we pulled out old photos of my father-in-law, my mother-in-law happily reminisced about their younger days, sharing stories about their travels and adventures. I listened intently, nodding along, when the phone rang. My mother-in-law doesn't have a smartphone, so the landline is her main means of communication. I wonder who that is. There were only a handful of people who would call, and they were all close friends who knew our situation. I thought they would avoid calling if they knew, but it might be an emergency. I'll answer it. It was better for me to move rather than make my mother-in-law, who had been talking about how sitting and standing were becoming difficult, get up. I quickly picked up the receiver near the entrance, and a man's voice I didn't recognize greeted me. He introduced himself as my sister-in-law's husband, speaking very politely. However, I had never met him before. I didn't know if he really was who he claimed to be. As I listened, wondering if this was some new scam targeting elderly people, he said, "I want to talk to you about the home renovation for caregiving. My father-in-law had already passed away. Why bring up caregiving renovations now? Did he mistake my mother-in-law? No, she wasn't in need of that level of care. Excuse me, but are you sure you have the right house? This is my wife's family home, right?" The man claiming to be my sister-in-law's husband mentioned her maiden name. Indeed, the maiden name matched my husband's family, and there was no mistake that this was their home. Moreover, the name matched my sister-in-law's. It is true that the woman you mention is my husband's sister. Thank goodness. Thank you for believing me. With all the trouble our marriage has caused, I was worried I had made a bad impression again. I don't know the reason why my in-laws so strongly opposed my sister-in-law's marriage. However, I don't get a bad impression from this man at all. On the contrary, he seems very humble and sincere. According to my brother-in-law, he heard that the cost of caregiving renovation would be around $30,000. He wants to do his best to make up for the inconvenience he has caused. He fully intends to pay the $30,000 and is preparing it. However, he just can't get the money ready by the deadline. His call was to ask if we could possibly wait and extend the payment deadline. It's awkward to let him explain everything before saying this, but since he spoke with such passion, I failed to convey the truth. Thank you for your politeness. So, about the extension. Please, wait a moment. When did you hear about the caregiving renovation? My father-in-law was very healthy and was working in agriculture until recently. So the need for caregiving, it didn't exist at all. It didn't? Wait, past tense? Yes, my father-in-law passed away. We just finished his funeral and cremation the other day. I see. Well... I could picture him panicking on the other end of the phone. He must be confused by the difference between what his wife told him and the truth I just shared. It just didn't make sense to him. He slowly told me that he had caused a lot of trouble for my in-laws when they got married. He had heard from his wife that her father needed care, and he intended to provide financial assistance as an apology for the trouble he had caused. He told me all this. Feeling that he was being honest, I asked him how the story of my father-in-law needing care came up. It had come up a few years ago. At first, he seemed to be sending a fixed amount every month as a contribution to caregiving expenses. However, it was clear neither my father-in-law nor mother-in-law had heard of such a thing. If they had known, my mother-in-law would have invited him to the funeral. He said, her mother was grateful and that it helped, so I thought I was slowly being forgiven. If you were being forgiven, wouldn't she talk to you? That's true. Moreover, the amount of money sent each year seemed to be increasing. He had been sending more money every month, assuming we had asked for additional support, something we had no recollection of. So none of that money has reached you. When I agreed, I could picture him getting extremely upset. It was hard for me to convey the information as well. As I was listening, I thought that maybe my sister-in-law, I couldn't quite say you're being scammed, but he said, you don't have to be considerate. I'm being scammed, aren't I? I couldn't say yes or no, so I remained silent. He probably took my silence as affirmation. He asked what he should do, assuming he was being scammed. Although it wasn't my place to answer that question, I just couldn't leave my sister-in-law, my husband's sister, alone, even though we were estranged. I told him we would discuss the matter and contact him later, and that was it for today. When I returned to my mother-in-law, she said, "That was a long call. Was it a pushy salesperson? You should just hang up on those." She seemed to think it was a persistent sales call. No, it was a man claiming to be my sister-in-law's husband. So I relayed the content of the phone call to my mother-in-law. She was trembling with anger even while listening, and her anger exploded even more after hearing everything. What kind of person is she, using her father as an excuse to ask her husband for money? Apparently, my sister-in-law has always been reckless with money. Owning expensive branded items she couldn't afford with her allowance or part-time job earnings, her actions were suspicious. When she wanted to get married, her partner was a man with a considerably high income who had an incomparable amount of pre-existing wealth, which led her parents to strongly oppose the marriage. The opposition wasn't for my sister-in-law's sake, but for her partner. We then decided to wait at the culprit's house with her husband for her to return home. I can't remember the last time I saw my sister-in-law. When she decided to date her then boyfriend with the intention of getting married, she introduced him to her parents and brother. There was a commotion about my sister-in-law's marriage, but since I was not yet related to my in-laws, I did not attend. So this would be my first time meeting my sister-in-law's husband. As I had perceived over the phone, he seemed to be a sincere person with a pleasant demeanor. I had heard he had high income, but he didn't seem to be living lavishly. He seemed to be trying to live a modest life, but if one of the reasons for this was my sister-in-law's lies, it must be a complicated set of emotions. Reuniting with my sister-in-law after several decades, my sister-in-law, who would never have expected her mother to be there at her home, was so surprised that her eyes widened as she stood frozen. The impression of my sister-in-law that I remember was one of someone who liked flashy things, but the sister-in-law in front of me was flashy to the point of being gaudy and lacking any sense of style, which was painful to watch. The three of us had agreed beforehand that we would go along with my sister-in-law's story at first. We decided not to touch upon the fact that she was lying. "It's been a while. I'm glad to see you're doing well." When my sister-in-law was suddenly spoken to with kind words, she stammered while responding to her mother. She probably thought her lies had been exposed and she was going to be yelled at, but she seemed confused by the unexpected kindness. "I wanted to see your face after all this time. Have you been doing well?" We didn't tell her the truth about her father's passing and maintained the pretense that he was still alive. I also apologized for not having been in touch and gave a suitable greeting. My sister-in-law said humbly that she was glad her mother seemed well and that she had been worried about her. However, she did not mention her father. It would be terrible if the conversation turned to her father and the topic of caregiving expenses slipped out of my husband's mouth. It seemed that my husband and she had met beforehand, but apparently her lies had not been exposed. She probably thought she could get away with it and not get caught. "Your mom is happy. It seems that you two are getting along well as a couple." My mother-in-law said she was happy to have a good daughter and hoped that my sister-in-law would have a change of heart and start repaying her husband little by little. The plan was to shower her with praise in the hope of changing her ways. Somehow, my sister-in-law got carried away and told my mother-in-law that she would support her if she ever needed caregiving, and even went so far as to say not to worry about money. It's amazing she could say such things in front of her husband who had been supporting her out of good intentions. I felt so sorry for her husband listening to all this. We conveyed our gratitude and left that day. From her behavior, it seemed likely that my sister-in-law had been using the money she asked for herself. Not knowing what she'd spent the sudden large sum of $30,000 on, we decided to have a private investigator look into her finances. The monthly caregiving funds of several $1,000s were indeed being used for her own benefit. However, it turned out that she was also heavily involved with a favorite host at a club, supporting him in various ways to make him number one. She'd been spending lavishly, buying expensive bottles and racking up debt she couldn't pay off each month. The host was being strictly pursued for the unpaid bills, which amounted to $30,000. Upon learning this, my sister-in-law's husband was furious and decided he couldn't overlook it any longer. He arranged everything while she was on a trip with her favorite host. Unaware of all this, my sister-in-law returned home after a few days to find her house completely empty, with not a single piece of furniture or personal item left behind. Panicking, she tried to contact her husband but couldn't get through, so she called me. At first, she was hysterical, but when I asked her, "How was your trip with your favorite host?" she immediately quieted down. She couldn't ask how I knew about it, since that would be admitting to her actions. Now it was my turn to reveal everything without giving her any room for rebuttal. "I can't believe you thought you weren't caught and took advantage of the situation. You betrayed your mother, your husband, and I don't think anyone will want to help you anymore." I also told her that the father-in-law she used as an excuse had passed away. It was not her fault for not knowing he had died, but using her father's care as a reason to ask for money was wrong. I informed her that her ex-husband knew the truth as well, and realizing she had been abandoned, she let out a scream like a madwoman over the phone. Her ex-husband didn't want to speak to her, and not wanting to burden my elderly mother-in-law any further, I offered to be the go-between with my sister-in-law. She continued to make a fuss over the phone. In a way, she was a pitiable person, not even knowing her father had passed away and using him as an excuse. She might regret it, but it's too late now. I conveyed one last message to her. Your ex-husband said he's going to demand full payment for the money you gave to the host. You'll have to figure out how to pay off the $30,000 debt yourself. Later, she received paperwork from a lawyer. She asked to talk to her husband, but he never agreed. He was furious and couldn't stand the thought of his ex-wife, even for the sake of legal procedures. Without any compromise, my sister-in-law was forced to live a frugal life while working. Of course, she couldn't afford to splurge at the host club anymore, and her favorite host stopped paying attention to her, leaving her with nothing but the huge debt she had accumulated. Occasionally, intimidating debt collectors would come by. Being naturally timid, my sister-in-law lived in constant fear of the lawyer's notices and the debt collector's visits. As for the three of us, we returned to our normal lives. It still took some time to sort through my father-in-law's belongings, but we decided to live on, including his share, as a family. Lately, my mother-in-law has started showing signs of decline, and I have a feeling the days she'll need caregiving might be close. Since we couldn't do anything for my father-in-law, my husband and I agreed to do our best for my mother-in-law.
I should have been brimming with happiness, finally owning the home of my dreams. But instead, I dread every upcoming weekend. Why? Because my husband's parents visit every single week, and I'm treated like a maid every time. Far from getting a break from the stress of work, I only grow more exhausted with each day off. I reached my limit and decided to invite my own parents over, hoping that it would deter my in-laws from visiting. But my husband lashed out at me, bellowing, "Don't you dare invite your parents. If you don't like to live here, you can get out." Well, fine, I'll leave. He'll be the one to regret it. My name is Emma. I've been married to Michael for 5 years. We were previously living in a rental, so we've been planning to buy our own house soon. Michael's parents got wind of this. "Oh, Emma, Michael told us about your plans. You're finally buying your own house, huh?" "Yes, that's right. If you need any help looking for places, just let us know. We're more than happy to help." "Ah, thank you. How about visiting some open houses soon?" I had plans on carefully selecting our new home with Michael, but my mother-in-law seems keen on being involved with every step of the property search. Just yesterday, she showed up unannounced with a brochure for a plot of land that's up for sale. "Emma, what do you think about this property? It's near the subway station and it's spacious enough for a duplex house." "A duplex house?" Apparently, they're planning on moving in with us. That's why they've been sticking their noses in our property search. She's been constantly chiming in with suggestions like, "It would be better to live nearby the subway since it's a hassle to walk," or "It would be convenient to have a supermarket nearby." And here I thought she was just looking out for us, but all along she was just stating her own preferences, thinking that she'd be living there too. I immediately relayed this to Michael. "Michael, your mother came over this afternoon with a brochure for a plot of land that's for sale. It seems like she and your father want to live with us." Yeah, she did mention something like that." "What? You heard it from your mom? Why didn't you tell me such an important thing?" "I thought we could talk about it once it was more concrete. Do you object, Emma?" "Well, yes, because I was thinking that we'd be living you and me. And besides, your mom and dad are still healthy, aren't they? I can't predict far into the future, but I think right now it would be best if we lived separately to maintain a good relationship." "I see. I understand how you feel, Emma." Michael listened to my feelings and was able to convince his parents that we're not planning to live together right now. After hearing Michael's reasoning, it seems his parents finally gave in. I thanked him again for handling the situation so well. "Thank you, Michael." "No problem, Emma. If you're against living with them, then we won't force it. Instead, let's have my folks visit our new home often after we move in." "Of course." After that, Michael and I found the perfect place, and we were finally able to get our own home. Once we moved in, his parents came to visit our new home right away. Emma, congratulations on the move. What a nice house you have. It seemed that his mother was satisfied with our new home. Please feel free to visit any time. I told her this with a gentle feeling, and that day, the four of us shared a meal around the dinner table. The following weekend, I suggested to Michael that we go buy some decorations for the living room, but he seemed disappointed and told me, can we postpone the shopping for another time? Do you have plans for the weekend? My folks said they wanted to come over. What? They just visited last week. Well, they seem to really like this house. You did say feel free to visit anytime, right, Emma? Well, yes, I did say that, but... Could you make dinner and entertain them a bit? After that, his parents started to visit our house every single week, and every time they visited, they became increasingly demanding. Emma, it's been so hot lately that I'm feeling a bit drained. Something light like noodles would be fine for lunch, but for dinner, I'd like something hearty like steak. Emma, do you know the new pastry shop near the station? It's all the talk around town, so I think it'd be perfect for dessert. Could you buy some? They would come over early in the morning, boss me around, not help with any household chores, and then leave. From the second visit onwards, they would even assume that it was okay to stay over. We're the type who enjoys a good breakfast, so could you have it ready for us first thing in the morning? The demands of my in-laws kept escalating. Between taking care of them, I barely had a chance to rest on weekends due to work fatigue, leaving me even more exhausted. I reached my breaking point and sincerely pleaded to my husband, Michael. Michael, I really want your mom and dad to stop staying over at our place every weekend. We can't help it. They said they want to come. Well, you could just refuse them. Between working on weekdays and caring for your parents from morning till night on weekends, I have no time to rest. Think about it. If we were living with them, it'd be every day, not just the weekends. Your in-laws originally wanted to live with us, but because you were strongly against it, we prioritized your opinion and they gave up on moving in. You should tolerate them coming over on weekends. Compared to living together, it might still be better. However, it was becoming unbearable to have this situation continue indefinitely. While I was troubled about what to do, I received a call from my mother. Oh, Emma, are you doing well? Sorry, Mom, I haven't been calling you. I'm managing somehow. Really? You sound down. Are you okay? Well, actually... I told my mother that I had been troubled by my mother-in-law's frequent visits since moving. Upon hearing this, my mother sounded concerned and said, That must be tough. I imagine you would be busily settling in after moving and buying necessary items, so I've been refraining from contacting you. Because my in-laws visit every weekend, I still hadn't invited my own mother to our new house. If I invite my mother, maybe my in-laws would refrain from coming over that weekend. That evening, I suggested this to Michael when he came home from work. Hey Michael, I want to invite my parents over this weekend. Is that okay? However, his response was unexpected. No way, my parents already planned to come over this weekend. But your parents have come over so many times already. My parents hadn't been over even once. That's because your parents haven't said they wanted to come. My mother has been considerate, waiting for us to settle down. She really wants to come. Oh, really? Well then, invite your parents over when mine aren't coming. They've waited this long, they can wait a bit longer. Don't you think it's strange to always prioritize your parents who are always over here? Can't your parents refrain next week? You're my wife now. It's only natural that we prioritize my parents. Anyway, tell your parents that this weekend is not good. I don't want to do that. You should just not invite your parents. If I can't call my parents because of that, then your parents don't have to come to my house anymore either. Since they've given you to me, they are prepared to not be able to see your daughter, right? Wait a minute, that's absurd. Why can't I invite my parents? Regardless of having a married daughter, isn't it natural for them to want to see their family? Despite Michael's stubborn refusal, I made this proposition to him. Okay, let's give up on this weekend. But from now on, let's try to invite each other's parents on a more regular basis, okay? Ugh, that's exactly what I was trying to avoid. If you're going to suggest something that troublesome, we might as well not invite your parents at all. Let's end this conversation. And we haven't resolved anything yet. In my mind, I've already decided. I'm not going to let your parents come over. If you don't like it, you can leave. No matter what I said, Michael only thought about his parents. He never considered me nor my parents. His refusal to have a conversation and his insistence on his own opinions finally wore out my patience. Fine, if you feel that strongly, Michael, I'll leave, and it'll be too late for regrets. Regrets? Haha, what on earth would I regret if you're gone? Just remember this, I won't recognize any apologies. Don't come crawling back wanting to return. Leaving a loudly laughing Michael behind, I headed home. When I told my parents what had happened, they agreed with me that Michael's opinion was unreasonable. My father was particularly angry.
A person who can't respect his family is fundamentally wrong. I'm disappointed in Michael. He should stay here and not return to that house.
Those were his words to me. I knew I wasn't wrong. Feeling relieved, I made up my mind to pursue a divorce. A few months after leaving the house, I received a call from Michael.
Hey, how much longer do you plan not to return? Have you forgotten what day it is this Saturday?
He appealed to me in a panicked tone. Oh right, it was the day we were supposed to invite your coworkers over to our new house.
Yes, exactly. We've been planning it since we moved, remember?
But won't your mother-in-law be coming that day? Why don't you tell your coworkers that my parents are visiting and refuse them?
There's no way I can say that. Moreover, I have invited a new boss for my department that day. If I cancel now, it could affect my future at work.
I don't care. You're the one who kicked me out, remember?
Is this the time to be arguing? Stop sulking and come back already. We need to start preparing for everyone's arrival, or we won't make it in time.
I'm not returning to that house.
What? Are you okay with jeopardizing my job?
I don't mind. I plan on leaving you.
Leaving? Are you serious?
Yes, I've been thinking about it since I left the house. My parents also agree with me.
Your parents too? They're just as out of touch as you. Do what you want. I'll have my parents help with the preparation for inviting my coworkers. I don't need you anymore. You're going to regret this.
That's my line. Goodbye. I hung up the phone abruptly. Right about now, Michael is probably frantically contacting his in-laws, preparing to invite colleagues from the office. Since his in-laws have done as they please so far, it would be good for them to taste some hardship for once. Then, during the problematic weekend, our home phone rang in the afternoon. When I picked it up, Michael, with a flustered voice, said,
Why is Emma answering the phone? I was calling my new boss's home.
Why? Well, because it's my house, of course.
Emma's house? Don't tell me, the new boss is Emma's father?
Yes, my father used to work at Michael's company. He had been away from the main office for a few years as an advisor because a related company was launching a new business, but it was decided that he would return to the main office next month and become Michael's boss. I knew, of course, but I couldn't leak the internal announcement until the information embargo was lifted, and I kept silent even from Michael, my husband. I thought he would notice when he saw the boss's name in the internal announcement, but it seems he didn't check properly. Michael started to plead with me desperately.
My mother has prepared expensive ingredients and good alcohol, but no one is coming. When I contacted my colleagues, they said there was a big fuss at the company because I refused to invite the new boss to my house. If the boss doesn't come, no one else will, they started saying. Emma, please convince your father to come to our house. Please persuade him to clear up everyone's misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding? It's not a misunderstanding, it's a fact, right? Michael, you said don't ever invite my parents to our house, didn't you?
I didn't know your father was my boss then. The situation is different now.
Quite a convenient excuse. I've asked you many times if you wouldn't regret it, haven't I?
Well,
It's too late to regret now. You're responsible for cleaning up your own mess. I hung up the phone without waiting for Michael's response. I told my father about the phone call from him, but of course, my father had no intention of going to that house.
There's no need to go to the house of a man who disregards his important daughter and her family.
My father was even more incensed. My father is scary when he gets angry. He was excited to buy expensive ingredients and alcohol for today, but I guess all their spending ended up being for nothing. The next day, Michael came to our house with a pale face.
Emma, I'm sorry for everything I've done until now. Let's start over again. Please come back home.
My father, instead of me, who was looking at him with a dumbfounded face, responded,
Start over? Do you even understand what you've done?
Michael, turning pale, prostrated himself before my father.
Sir, I apologize for my actions. I am here today to apologize. You've ignored my daughter for months now, yet you've never once bothered to visit her. I didn't think you'd turn out to be so untrustworthy. No, that's not it. I've been busy at work. You're not so busy you have to work on the weekends, or so I've heard. Weekends, well...
Michael stammered. Likely his mother was visiting him every weekend. Michael, who never did housework, would have given up if it weren't for her help. I'm sure his mother was also looking after him during the weekdays, taking advantage of my absence. My father, guessing this, sternly said,
Never mind. You seem to get along quite well with your parents. It seems like you two jumped into marriage before you were ready to be independent. That's not true. I respect Emma's feelings and even rejected the idea of living with my parents. You're still saying that? It's natural for a couple to decide whether to live with their parents. Yet, you kept harping on Emma for rejecting the idea and never listened to her after. How is that prioritizing Emma's feelings? Well, And marriage means both families become relatives, yet you invited your parents to your home every weekend and told us absolutely don't come over. How dare you disregard Emma's family, us? I didn't know you were going to be my boss. If I'd known that, I would have invited you first before my parents. That's exactly what I mean when I say you're self-centered. You don't get it at all. People like you shouldn't be in a leadership position. My department doesn't need someone as selfish as you. But sir, silence. Get out of my house now. Don't ever show your face here again.
Afterward, my father advised his superiors to remove Michael from his department and reassign him to a regional branch. No one defended Michael, who was already known for his selfish behavior. Even his parents, who had doted on him, couldn't follow him to a remote region. Now they can only see him once a year, if at all. Meanwhile, I've been living comfortably at my parents' house after finalizing my divorce with Michael and focusing on my work. I work hard weekdays and spend weekends with the people who I love. When I think back to my past lifestyle when I was not able to live such a normal life, the free life I have now is comfortable and irresistible. From now on, I want to cherish my parents and live at my own pace. My name is Samantha. It's been 4 years since I graduated from vet school, and now I'm a 28-year-old working at a dog specialist clinic. Currently, I live alone near the clinic to manage the night shift, but my 6-year older brother and my 2-year younger brother visit me on their way to and from work, and on holidays bringing me home-cooked meals from our mother. Considering I'm not too skilled in the kitchen, I'm truly grateful. The other day, my brother Mark swung by after work.
Hey, you about to finish your shift? I have something to discuss, so how about grabbing dinner together, he said.
Sounds good, but I'm beat from being on my feet all day. How about we get takeout and eat at my place? I replied.
Fair enough. Then lend me your keys. I'll pick up something from the food court at the mall nearby, he said.
Okay, and sorry if it's a bit messy in there. Haha. It was odd for Mark to have something to discuss with me. Unlike my younger brother, who comes to me for advice on everything from love stories to money troubles, Mark isn't usually the one initiating serious conversations. And he's not the type to complain about his job either, so I was a bit on edge as I headed home wondering what it could be about.
Listen, I understand you're busy with work, but you need to clean up a bit more regularly. You can't even invite a boyfriend over with the place looking like this, haha.
Mark chuckled. Hey, mind your own business. I've been working a lot of night shifts recently. By the time I get home and wake up, it's nearly evening. Between catching up on household chores and going back to work, it becomes too late to start vacuuming. If it comes down to cleaning or doing laundry, laundry wins, I retorted.
Well, at least take out the trash more often, haha, he replied.
Alright. So, was your big talk just to lecture me on my lifestyle? I asked.
No, actually. There's a potential marriage proposal on the table, he said.
What? Marriage? Who's getting married? I exclaimed.
You don't think I'd be talking about a marriage proposal for you, do you?
He smirked. Wait, you mean you're getting married? Are you kidding me? I asked in shock.
Whoa, are you calling me a liar? That's rude, haha.
He laughed it off. This is my brother Mark. Athletic and outgoing at first glance, he might seem like the picture-perfect professional, but the truth is, he went to an all-boys school through middle school and high school, studied a science major in college, and was always involved in athletic clubs. As a result, he spent most of his student life surrounded by men and struggles with the subtleties of understanding others' feelings, let alone dealing with women. Hearing the word marriage coming from such a brother was quite a surprise for me.
Well, to be honest, I still have some doubts,
he admitted. So, who's the one marrying you? Someone I know? I asked.
Well, you might know her or might not,
he mused. Seriously, who is it? I inquired.
It's Professor Smith's daughter, the professor who supervised you. Her name is Sarah. I think you both graduated from the same university, but you might not be familiar with her since you were in different departments, he revealed.
What? No way! I let out a shrill scream that seemed to come from the top of my head, and for good reason. If my memory serves me correctly, my brother's bride-to-be is a woman who could be described as my nemesis. The university I graduated from is a massive private university with numerous departments and a large number of students. My department, veterinary medicine, was located far from the main campus, so most students graduate with little interaction with students from other departments. However, I joined a board game club that I had loved since I was a child. As a result, I was blessed with friends and seniors from various departments. But the one who threatened the joy out of our harmonious club activities was none other than Sarah, a member of the club next door to ours. Sarah, the daughter of a professor at our university, was a standout beauty even among the in-house students. She was the kind of female student who was always surrounded by admirers in event-based clubs. But when her club was suspended due to activities against the university's regulations, Sarah, with too much time on her hands, temporarily joined our club. Initially, we were perplexed, but we accepted her, hoping to introduce her to the charm of board games. But Sarah's objective was not board games, of course. She was there to stir up the club, quite literally. One couple that fell victim to her was my best friend Linda and Jack. Linda and Jack were an official couple since high school and enrolled in the same architecture department. They had a dream of owning an architecture firm together in the future. However, Jack fell easily before Sarah's tricks. On our way back from a trip with other female friends, when Linda and I stopped by Jack's apartment to deliver souvenirs, we ran into Sarah wearing his shirt from inside his room. What is this? Why is Sarah here?
Well, this is...
Don't dodge my question, answer me. And Sarah, you answer too. Why are you doing this? Hey, don't make a scene. You're being a nuisance to the neighbors, you know. Haha. Besides, I had no idea he had a girlfriend. Ha ha ha. So you're saying you were behind Linda and the others breaking up, weren't you?
Is that true? Does that mean you've done this with Bob and Mark too?
Cause trouble? That's a mean way to put it, ha ha ha. I just thought that he wouldn't break up with his girlfriend over a meal or two. If he likes me that much, well, I can't help it, can I? Ha ha ha. As an excuse, it's a pretty terrible one. Jack, what about this woman do you like so much that you betrayed Linda?
Wait, Sarah, you're joking, right? You're serious about me, not like with Bob and Mark, right? Tell me that's right.
What? Serious? Me with you? That's obviously impossible. Ha ha ha.
No way.
Just think about it. Do you really think a man like you, out of nowhere, could be a match for me? You touched a star for a moment, so you should cherish that as a lifetime memory. Oh, but maybe you used up your lifetime's luck. Ha ha ha. As Jack crumbled, Sarah quickly changed her clothes and came over to where Linda and I were standing with grim faces at the entrance. Then, pushing crying Jack towards us, she said, this is just too much trouble. Here, take him back, will ya? Ha ha. Besides, I don't remember making him mine. Ha ha ha. Stunned by her words, we watched as she added, I'd be bothered if he kept acting like a boyfriend, so it might be better if you just take him back. You two should get back together. Recycle, reuse? Whatever you want, haha, before she walked away toward the main street. After that, I dragged Linda to our apartment and we took turns staying over until her emotions settled. In the end, Linda and Jack broke up and Jack dropped out of university. In the end, the group was filled with people who had been messed with by Sarah and became ex-couples with a similar history, leading to an awkward atmosphere and members quitting one after another, causing the club to collapse. Frankly, I have nothing but memories of the latter half of my fun college days being ruined by Sarah. It was quite a shock when the topic of marriage between Sarah and my brother came up. When I asked, how on earth did you two meet? My brother said, well, it's not so much that we met, but the vice president of a client company I'm working with said, I have a niece who hasn't gotten married yet, would you like to meet her? And since I didn't have a reason to refuse and I wasn't dating anyone, I agreed to meet her. For some reason she liked me, and things just went really fast from there. Huh, but are you okay with that, bro? I think marriage is a pretty big decision.
Honestly, I don't really care either way, haha,
he said rather casually. Actually, my brother Mark has a somewhat careless, hands-off attitude when it comes to important decisions, even though he doesn't appear to take them seriously. And when he realizes the consequences of his decisions aren't good for him, he has no problem cutting his losses and moving on without any shame. He hardly ever considers how much trouble he causes to those around him. It's really unbearable for those who get caught up in his mess. But if you think about it, as long as there's no malice involved, it's only slightly better than Sarah, who is just as irresponsible in her own way. At this point, it might be wise to leave them alone unless the sparks fall on us.
Huh? Did you say something?
Nope, it's nothing. After that, the marriage talks between Mark and Sarah were officially confirmed, and the two families proceeded with formalities like meeting each other and exchanging gifts. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I had a hard time taking weekends off, so I was unable to attend any of those events, and the day of Mark's wedding came. On that auspicious day blessed with clear weather, I had finally managed to take a day off to attend Mark's wedding. First, there was a pre-wedding photo shoot at the chapel in the hotel, and since the photographer allowed the family members to take pictures with their cameras and smartphones, the photo shoot started with both families watching. Sarah and Mark, dressed in a tailcoat and wedding dress, made quite the picturesque couple. I was busy taking photos myself when, several times, my eyes met Sarah's through the camera lens. After the photo shoot went smoothly, we had a quick rehearsal for the ceremony, and then it was time for family introductions. The groom's side introduction started with my father, and when it was my turn, Sarah's expression changed for a moment. The bride's side introduction went smoothly as well, and during the break before the ceremony, I was talking with other family members in the waiting room when a staff member brought a note from Sarah calling for me. When I went to the bride's waiting room, she said, "No way, seriously? I can't believe it, haha. What's so unbelievable? Oh, that we're going to be sister-in-laws? It's quite a coincidence, isn't it? I can't believe it either." Ugh, I knew he had a sister, but I thought there was no way it would be you with the same name. Talk about being caught off guard, haha. So, you wrote on the note that you had something to say. Then, seemingly irked, Sarah smacks the table with a bang. However, I no longer had any need to care about Sarah. I don't want to see your smug face throughout this whole wedding ceremony and reception. You've finally become a vet, right? You've always excused yourself from participating in events because of work, so why don't you just go make up some excuse about being called in urgently and go home right now? You look better in your grubby white coat than in a dress you're not used to wearing after all. I was momentarily taken aback, but on reflection, there was indeed no need for me to grace the event with my presence. So, with a broad smile like a waiter at some bar, I gladly left the bride's waiting room saying, "Sure thing, with pleasure." At the cloakroom, I collected my coat and promptly set off home. However, the next day, Sarah, who was supposed to be going on her honeymoon, showed up at the animal hospital where I work, all alone, and began to scream at me. "Hey, what's the deal? Why are you acquainted with my uncles? What's the fuss about so early in the morning? You're scaring the dogs we have here for care." "I don't care about the dogs. I have bigger problems." As Sarah continued to raise her voice, I decided to get permission from the hospital director to take her to the double-doored operation room to have a talk. "So, what do you want to talk about? Is it okay for you to be here? I heard you were going on your honeymoon this afternoon." "There's no honeymoon. The wedding itself is likely to be canceled." "Oh, why's that? I thought my brother would be thrilled to be marrying such a sought-after woman." "That's what I thought too, but after the reception yesterday, he was talking for a long time with my aunt and uncle, and then he suddenly said, 'I'm calling off this wedding.'" "Oh really? My brother has quite a bold move, doesn't he?" "It's not funny, and my aunt and uncle, instead of reprimanding him, they started saying things to me like, 'We won't consider you our niece anymore, you ungrateful, shameless girl. We don't know a daughter like you. You must have done something, confess.'" At that point, I explained that I had not done anything on my end, just that I happened to know Sarah's aunt and uncle. After the family introductions, I had a conversation with them saying, "What a coincidence," and was then told by Sarah to go home, so I just went home. But then I got a message from Sarah's aunt and uncle, who found it strange that I didn't attend the wedding or reception, and I just answered honestly to their questions. "Honestly, what did you tell them?" Well, first I said that I went home because you told me I was annoying. Then they asked, why would Sarah say such a thing to the bride's sister? And I suggested, maybe it's due to some grudges from our student days. "What? What were you thinking? Of course they would ask more questions." So I honestly recounted our past as accurately as I could remember it. "But that should only anger your brother. Why would my aunt and uncle be furious?" That's when I explained the reason why Sarah's aunt and uncle might have been furious. In fact, Sarah's aunt and uncle do not have any children, and they are crazy about their pet Shih Tzu. When they were walking their Shih Tzu, they had a horrible collision with a sports bike that suddenly rushed out of a crossroad. The dog was seriously injured and rushed to this vet clinic. An emergency surgery was necessary, but the dog had lost a lot of blood, and it seemed like the blood available from the clinic's own donation dogs would not be sufficient in time. That's when the clinic got in touch with volunteer dog owners who had registered to donate blood in emergency situations. The one who came running was Linda and her beloved pet. Linda is an architect designer working for a major company after her graduation. She adopted a puppy born at the home of a client she had become friendly with and kept it as a pet. Thanks to Linda's dog, the Shih Tzu surgery was a success. As a token of their deep gratitude, the couple requested Linda's company to renovate their vacation house. They got even closer to Linda and were enraged when they heard her complain while she was tipsy about a shameless woman who ruined her relationship with her college boyfriend. However, they hadn't asked Linda for the name of the woman, considering it inappropriate. When they heard my story, they realized that the shameless woman was their own niece, Sarah. Then they confessed everything to my parents, my brother, and Sarah's parents, while also declaring the disownment of Sarah. My brother, for whom Sarah was a precious niece of a major client, no longer saw any point in marrying her, as her value as a sales point vanished. However, I didn't understand why Sarah's parents were also furious and kicked their daughter out. After all, Sarah's father, Professor Smith, was also my teacher back in college, was known for his deep love for his daughter, and had always been the one to clean up her messes. My father is also close to retirement. He was planning to open a vet clinic. Really? The professor? But setting up a clinic, securing parking space and all, the costs are tremendous. There's no way he could cover all that with just his retirement money. He was planning to ask his brother for a loan. But now, after all this, they are saying this is all because you failed to raise your daughter properly, and it looks like they won't lend him any money. That's why they are all cutting ties with me. It seems like it's too late for them to realize their mistake though, ha. Stop joking around and help me out. I don't think I can do anything about this. Please, I'll do anything. I'll even kneel down. I don't know how much your kneeling is worth, but I really don't need that, huh? Even after that, she kept begging me tearfully, but in the end, the clinic's director had to call the cops to stop her from causing a disturbance. Reluctantly, she left. When Sarah realized she couldn't persuade me, she ran to my brother, Mark, and to her aunt and uncle, begging them while crying. But they didn't listen to her. Moreover, Sarah's bad reputation spread from her aunt and uncle to her relatives and from the relatives to the other people she knew, until nobody paid any attention to her anymore. She quit her job and started living in an old apartment managed by a distant relative that her image-conscious parents rented for her. As for me, I'm busy every day with my job as a vet, which I believe is my true calling. On the other hand, my unrepentant brother Mark seems quite pleased, saying, "Now that I've become a man who can no longer dream of marriage, people might sympathize with me, but at least I won't have to deal with any unnecessary meddling." Our parents seem to have a headache with their children, including my younger brother, who don't seem to have any prospects for romantic relationships, but they believe that everything happens for a reason. So, they decide to take it easy and not rush things.